This is Stratford-upon-Avon, Shakespeare's birthplace. English's best-selling author has served the town well. 3 million tourists visit every year, making Shakespeare English's biggest export.
Is that the one you mean?
The beauty of Shakespeare's language is that we can still understand it today. Shakespeare's English has become so quotable that it's come to define English in the words that we use, the thoughts we express, be it for native speakers, for students of English, or for tourists.
For example, Julius Caesar, French Roman's countryman, lend me your ears.
To be or not to be?
Most important, to be and not to be, that's the question.
To be or not to be? To be or not to be, that is the question, isn't it?
Do thou hear a mouse?
To be or not to be?
It's a good read.
To be or not to be?
Oh, yeah.
That is the question.
The quality of mercy is not strain.
Battle, toil and trouble, that's about it.
He's my friend, come from China, and Shakespeare is a very famous person in Chinese.
Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?
Wherefore art thou, Romeo?
Yes.
And is this the dagger I see before thee? Me?
We heard about Shakespeare at school and later on at the theatre, and we are interested in reading Shakespeare.
Hail thee, Thane of Lambs. Hail thee, Thane of Cawdor. Hail thee, King Hereafter.
Shakespeare is the favourite all over the world.
Most scholars today attribute 38 plays, 154 sonnets and other major poems to Shakespeare, who was born in this house. But his biggest contribution to English might be the vocabulary that we find in his work. Well over 2,000 of our words, for instance, today are first recorded there. Words which broaden the way we look at life, tell us how we act, tell us how we think, tell us what we value. Although Shakespeare didn't invent them, for instance, the words obscene, accommodation, barefaced, misanthrope, leapfrog and lacklustre all make their first appearance in his work, as do advertising, assassination, courtship, dexterously, indistinguishable, premeditated and reliance. Over 400 years ago, Shakespeare already used an enormous English vocabulary of at least 21,000 different words. English was in a state of flux, and Shakespeare was perfectly placed to make the most of it. Shakespeare is influenced by the language of ideas at the end of the 16th century. His language still influences ours today. In many ways, his words and images define the way we think. Hamlet's "To thine own self be true," for instance, explores the notion of personal identity, which we still probe. What the Dickens has nothing to do with Charles, but makes its first appearance in Shakespeare's Merry Wives of Windsor. As good luck would have it, that does too. Beggars all description and salad days are inherited from Antony and Cleopatra. Hamlet gave us In My Mind's Eye, Caviar to the General, To be cruel, to be kind, To the manner born, Hoist with his own petard, To hold the mirror up to nature, as the lady said. It's full of quotations. Shakespeare coined many of the expressions we use today, but brevity is the soul of wit, so I won't play fast and loose, but I'll make a virtue of necessity and vanish into thin air. In many ways, Stratford itself defined Shakespeare's use of the English language. The Stratford of the second half of the 16th century was a village of merely 1,500 inhabitants. Shakespeare's thought to have attended Stratford School. He would initially have been taught in English, but he'd also have studied the Latin classics, Cicero, Virgil and Ovid. And by the upper forms, it would have been forbidden to speak in English, only in Latin.
Tainarias etiam falces aut ostia ditis.
Over 400 years later, they're still teaching Latin in the same room that Shakespeare studied in.
Ipse cara solem zygrum, testudine amorem, te dulcis coniunx, te solin litere secum.
Te veniente di, te deciente canebat, tenaris etiam falces, aut ostia ditis.
E caligantem nigra, formidine lucum, ingressus menisque, audit regenque tremendum.
Later on in Shakespeare's life, it seems that he picked up both French and Italian. The Italian story source of Othello, for example, never appeared in translation into English. But Shakespeare's English education would have been completed at church. This church, Holy Trinity Church in Stratford, in which he was later buried. This is his grave. At church, as an adolescent, he would have had to read texts in English, especially Tyndall's English Bible. Shakespeare didn't go to university, and early on he was mocked for that by the London wits who'd benefited from university tutoring. But just a church and a grammar school education were to provide the young William Shakespeare with the language base that he needed to become English's greatest playwright. Shakespeare also knew about the inkhorn controversy and used both Latin words and plain terms in his own writing. He used new words which had just appeared towards the end of the 16th century, like multitudinous, emulate, demonstrate, dislocate, initiate, meditate, or allurement, eventful, horrid, modest, and vast. He invented and was also fond of compound words like hugger-mugger, baby eyes, fair play, break vow or pell-mell, smooth-faced, widow comfort, canker sorrow, bare-picked, basilica-like, half-blown and ill-tuned, which are uniquely his. But there are some words which Shakespeare used which don't survive. Our everyday language might sound very different if we were saying appertainments, cadent, exsufflicate, questris, tortive, solia, abruption, persistive, protractive, ungenitored, unplausive, vastidity. And Shakespeare's longest word, honorificabilitudinitatibus, which means with honour, has sadly fallen out of fashion altogether.